What to do with a dramatic girlfriend. Victoria and I have broken up again. For the 88th time this month, she suggested we part ways. This time, just like before, I thought I'd head to the riverside to wallow in sadness, before heading back to write a heartfelt apology. But the riverside wind was chilling, leaving me cursing rather than feeling melancholic. With no other option, I headed back to write my apology. However, just as I got home, my boss called, sending me on an urgent business trip. I ended up busy for over a month, and just as my career was about to take off, I got a call from Victoria. She asked, "Why haven't you come to console me yet?" Speechless, I replied, Sorry, I've been too busy to write that apology. How about we just end it this time?" During a chat with friends, someone teased, "Charles, you and Victoria have been together for so many years. When do you plan to get married?" As I glanced at Victoria, she interrupted with a cold snort. "When he prepares the $70,000 for the dowry, then we'll talk." She paused, then looked at me, adding, "Also, let Ethan be the best man. I've already discussed it with him." I was left speechless, unsure if she was pushing for the dowry or really wanted Ethan as the best man. Taking a sip of water, I replied, "I've almost got the dowry sorted, but as for the best man, I've got a few college roommates who want to come. Let's not trouble Ethan." Without even looking at me, Victoria said, "Then just add another best man." I sighed. "I can't add more. You know my group of friends is exactly 4. Having an odd number of bridesmaids and groomsmen is considered unlucky." Frustrated, she said, "Then just find another one. Ethan's so enthusiastic. How can I face him if you decline?" Our friends had fallen silent. Such bizarre arguments between us were nothing new to them. They never got involved because I'd always end up apologizing meekly. Victoria would give me the cold shoulder for a couple of days, and I'd find a way to reconcile. No one wants to play the fool in such a relationship. This time, however, I was resolute. His enthusiasm is his business. How you refuse him is yours. But who I choose as a best man is my decision, and I don't agree. Victoria stepped up to me and asked, "What if I insist?" I didn't answer, but she could already sense my refusal. Furious, she said, "Then let's break up, Charles. Don't contact me again." She slammed the door, leaving our friends awkwardly behind. After a few pleasantries, everyone joked, "Charles has it all under control. He'll sort Victoria out. Just console her and it'll be fine." Some said, "Charles, don't spoil women too much. You're too indulgent with her." I chuckled, not agreeing with anyone. Alone I wandered, reminiscing about the years with Victoria. From high school crushes to solidifying our relationship in college, we endured a long-distance relationship and a challenging cohabitation period. Every stage had its failures, and each time I gave my all to make amends. I often asked myself, why? Is loving someone supposed to be this humbling? Why should a man always have to console an angry woman? Why shouldn't men reason with women? Why can't love manifest as mutual compromise and support? Why can't it mean mutual understanding and tolerance? Love and reason are not mutually exclusive. Because of love, one might avoid arguing, but doesn't mean one shouldn't argue. Because of love, one might offer a dowry, but it doesn't mean one must. Yet every time I decided to leave, another voice would ask, "If you give up now, won't all the efforts over the years be a joke?" So I persevered, hoping to move her, hoping we could have a future. Lost in thought, I walked past a river I jokingly called the River of Forgiveness. After every fight with Victoria, I'd come here to vent my frustration and adjust my mindset. But today, it was especially cold. I hadn't even started feeling melancholic before goosebumps appeared. I quickly wrapped my coat tighter and decided to head home to sulk. Turning around, I spotted a barbecue stall. It was funny, I often came here. Once, after a fight with Victoria, I ordered 50 skewers in anger but couldn't eat a single one. Too upset, the vendor's skills had improved, and even after a dinner meeting, the aroma of grilled meat lured me in. I didn't dare order too much this time, fearing a repeat. But after 20 skewers, I realized I could eat more. My mouth was busy, my stomach full, and my heart felt less empty. Standing at my doorstep, I hesitated. After living together for so long, traces of our shared life were everywhere in this small house. But upon opening the door, I was greeted by a pile of delivery boxes for makeup and luxury items, and shoes filled the shoe rack, spilling onto the floor. Anger far outweighed the unpleasantness of the breakup. She had always been like this, never treating my money as if it were worth anything. And all this just because I advised her to be a bit more restrained. Yet, she turned the tables on me, saying that if dating would lower her quality of life, why should she date me? As if she were spending her own money. But in reality, to satisfy her, I had only 8 outfits for all seasons and ate no more than 5 flavors. She spent money lavishly, never caring about my quality of life. When my anger burned away the sadness, I packed up everything and picked up my phone, intending to hide some posts, fearing that seeing them later would upset me. Suddenly, I saw the boss in the group chat mentioning me, offering some suggestions for my proposal. By the time I closed the proposal documents, the sky was already turning light. I was surprised to find that the first day after the breakup had passed so easily. So on that fresh morning, I decisively blocked all of Victoria's contacts. Victoria had never come back. I knew she was waiting for me to back down, and I thought I might do so again this time, as I was used to it. It seemed that backing down for love was not such a shameful thing. But every time I picked up my phone, something more important came up, either a proposal to be drafted or a client reaching out. As things went on, I hadn't contacted her for 8 or 9 days. Unknowingly, I accomplished something I thought was utterly impossible, and it wasn't as emotionally torturous as I imagined. That morning during the meeting, the supervisor said this client was very important, and we needed to send someone there on a long-term basis. The project would take at least 1.5 years. Without thinking, I raised my hand. He glanced at me and said, "Singles first." I immediately responded, "I'm single." The entire conference room burst into laughter. After all, everyone was well aware of the legendary tales between Victoria and me. Yet, despite the supervisor asking several times, no one else volunteered. After all, leaving headquarters could make one's position awkward after 1.5 years. From a career planning perspective, this wasn't the best choice. But for me, besides being able to temporarily leave Victoria and face my feelings more clearly, the more significant thing was that the client was in a city I had always wanted to visit. Victoria never wanted to leave here, as no place was more comfortable for her, so she never agreed to leave, not even for a trip to that city. Friends said she feared I wouldn't return once I went. I could only smile at that. Eventually, the supervisor decided I should go, reminding me repeatedly before departure, "You mustn't give up halfway. No matter how things develop with your girlfriend, you have to stick it out for this 1.5 years. I replied with a smile, mission accomplished. The early days in the new city were truly hectic. I worked overtime for 2 weeks straight without even having time to find my own place, staying in a hotel arranged by the client. It wasn't until the 3rd weekend that I finally had the chance to explore. It resembled what I'd seen in blogs and books. But being there in person, I could appreciate its unique features. I thought to myself that I had indeed made the right choice in coming here. I was a bit surprised when my mom called. It seemed like over 1 year since our last unpleasant conversation. They had been urging me to get married since I was 25, but by 28 they saw no progress. Every meeting involved scolding me about how our family line would end if I continued being so carefree, even advising me against using protection to turn the situation irreversible. My mom asked, "You're not really planning to wait until you're 30 to get married, are you? In our family's 8 generations, there's never been someone like you." I replied, "Well, I'm just broadening your horizons." She said, "I don't have time for your nonsense. Your sister saw on your social media that you broke up with that Victoria. Is it true? You used to make up quickly, but this time it's been quite a while. Have you really ended it?" I replied impatiently, "Just say what you want to say, don't beat around the bush. I have work to do." My mom nagged, "You have such a bad temper, just like your dad." No wonder you two can't stay in the same space, I said, speechless. I'm hanging up if you don't get to the point. I heard her hurried voice. Don't hang up, don't hang up. I just wanted to say, if you're free this weekend, your aunt introduced someone to you. Do you want to meet? She works in the same city as you. I replied, oh, I might not be in the same city anymore. I forgot to tell you I moved to a new city. My mom's voice suddenly rose, discontented. Why did you change jobs again out of nowhere? You've always been like this, never listening to anyone's advice, always messing around. Not wanting to argue with her, I directly asked, just tell me, what does this person do? How much is Aunt charging for this kind of matchmaking service? My mom, who had just been speaking loudly, suddenly hesitated. She's the goddaughter of a friend of your aunt's who's a CEO. She works as a secretary, very pretty. The young lady is only 24 and already. After much hard work, I finally bought a villa. Could my aunt really do me any harm? I'm speechless. I don't understand how she can say these things without any guilt. If she were standing in front of me right now, I'd definitely take a closer look to see if her face was red. I laughed and said, are you sure? My mom replied, do you have to speak so sarcastically? Wasn't it just last year that your aunt introduced you to someone you weren't happy with? Didn't she apologize to you then? She really didn't know the person's situation. Otherwise, why would she introduce them to you? I was too lazy to argue. If she didn't know the situation, why did she insist on the introduction? My dear aunt introduced a girl to me. I disagreed, but she insisted I add her on some social media. I was too lazy to argue with her, so I thought, fine, I'll add her. I'll just reject her directly online. As soon as I mentioned that Auntie had introduced me, she replied with a price. I didn't expect her to revert to her old ways this year. I said, tell my aunt to shut up. If I see her doing such shameless things again, I'll make sure to teach her a lesson when I go home for the holidays. My mom said, you really don't appreciate what's good for you. As soon as I hung up the phone, I felt a serene silence around me. Never before have I appreciated a quiet environment so much. I efficiently finished a project and sent it to the work group. The client team was full of praise, which made me feel quite elated. I posted on social media, another day of thriving. Though I've always had decent connections, I didn't expect such a warm response this time. Many friends commented, Charles is all about work now. We've been trying to meet for a week and he's just busy working. Others said, still working? Your defenses are down, you know. Someone else added, why haven't you deleted your breakup post? Haven't you made up yet? Didn't put enough thought into surprises this time, huh? You don't care about use advisors at all. I replied to each, been on a business trip, let's gather when I return. My heart's defenses are like city gates, empty and barren. We haven't reconciled. Just as I finished replying, my phone rang. It was Jackson, the boyfriend of a friend who gets along well with Victoria. We often dine together. He asked, hey man, where have you been having fun lately? I replied, working, it's been busy. He paused and then whispered, are you on a business trip? I passed by your place the other day and knocked, but you weren't home. I said, yeah, out of town. Is there something you need? He quickly responded, no, nothing. Just haven't seen you in a while. Wanted to ask you out for a meal. I said, then wait till I'm back from the trip. I'll call you. He said, all right. Just as I was about to hang up, he added, have you heard about Victoria and Ethan? I honestly replied, not really. Been quite tied up lately. I didn't want to engage in this topic, but he continued, recently Ethan has been flaunting Victoria. They attend all sorts of events together. Heard Ethan gave Victoria a big diamond ring the other day. Everyone's guessing if they're getting together. Victoria hasn't said anything, but we think she's waiting for you to apologize. I chuckled and asked, what mistake did I make? He hesitated and said, weren't you always the one apologizing before? I laughed. I apologized because I cared. What if I don't care anymore? Suddenly, I heard a loud door slam and Victoria's friend called her name. The guy awkwardly hung up. Honestly, when he started speaking, I knew Victoria was with him. We've been together so long that I know everyone's character well. This guy is straightforward, and never hesitates in conversation, but today he was oddly hesitant. Easy to notice the difference. After a while, he sent me a long text, first apologizing for his abrupt behavior, then talking about Victoria and Ethan. He concluded, "Victoria must regret it. She stayed at my girlfriend's and my place for 3 days and I couldn't stand it, so I agreed to call you. She might not like Ethan, but honestly, I've always felt for you, Charles. Stay strong, cheer up, let's have a drink sometime. Jackson is a loyal friend. I even thought he might have acted differently on purpose for me to realize. But none of that matters. What's important is that I'm genuinely happy now." In the afternoon, my phone received its first blocked call from Victoria, who was on my blacklist. How ironic. I've been away for nearly a month, and it's only after her attempts through others failed that she called me. Suddenly, the past decade seemed utterly undeserving. Then a text from an unknown number popped up. "Charles, where did you put my suitcase?" "Oh, Charles, this is the woman you've loved for 10 years. She is. Before me, you're always so aloof and arrogant, even when I try to give you an out." I didn't reply to the message, but after the evening meeting ended, I absent-mindedly answered the call. I heard that familiar voice of Victoria on the other end, mixed with a hint of unease in her cool tone. She asked, "Where are you?" I replied, "At work." She questioned, "Why did you block me?" I answered, "Because we broke up." Her voice rose a bit. "Just because we broke up, you blocked me? Why didn't you block me all those previous times we broke up?" Calmly, I retorted, "How do you know I didn't block you then? After we broke up, when did you ever call me? Wasn't it always me admitting fault and asking to reconcile?" She asked again, "Where are you?" It was rush hour, and colleagues were constantly saying goodbye as they left. Distracted, I responded to them without noticing the silence on the phone. After a long while, I realized the call was still connected. I said hello, and she replied, "This is the first time you've ignored me for someone else." There was no way to argue, nor was there a need. She asked, "Did you go to the city by the sea? I heard someone speak with that accent just now. It wasn't a secret I needed to hide. Anyone visiting my office would know." So I candidly admitted, "Yes, I'm here on a business trip." Her voice noticeably dropped. "You never used to go on business trips. You said if you did, there'd be no one to take care of me. You always put me first." I couldn't help but chuckle bitterly, a complex emotion rising within. I thought to myself, "Charles, you've been such a pushover. Maybe it's time you take care of yourself." So I said, "Didn't you say we shouldn't contact each other after breaking up? I'm just following through on your words. Since we're not in touch, there's no reason not to go on business trips for your sake anymore. You know, over the years I've given up many opportunities because of you." She hesitated, "But," I asked, "But what?" She paused for a long time but ultimately said nothing. After the prolonged silence, I ended the call. It was a conversation that left a chill. She sensed my departure yet said nothing to make me stay. Fortunately, I had long prepared myself for this, or perhaps my scarred heart had already become numb. I wasn't sad, I just felt relieved, hoping everything could end with that call. The day I rented an apartment in the city by the sea, I invited my usual work partners over for a housewarming. As we laughed and chatted while leaving the office, someone outside caught my eye. A colleague jokingly said, "We haven't seen such a stunning beauty in this building before." I followed their gaze and saw Victoria standing among the crowd. It had been about a month since I'd last seen her. Since we ended our long-distance relationship after college, we'd never been apart for so long that I thought maybe it wasn't so bad. She walked towards me slowly, her eyes downcast. My colleagues gave us curious glances, and someone sensibly said, "Looks like Charles isn't free for dinner tonight. Let's reschedule." For the first time, I thought being too considerate wasn't always a good thing. But Victoria clearly didn't share that view. She shyly bid farewell to my colleagues, waiting until they all left before asking, "Charles, why aren't you coming to comfort me?" At that moment, I felt my blood freeze. I'd used all my energy to sustain such a selfish and capricious lover. She had come to find me, and we could have talked, yet she chose to ask why I wasn't comforting her. Why should I comfort her? Why me? Why comfort at all? Go home and let your dad comfort you. In a relationship, does one compromise lead to a lifetime of compromises? But isn't the point of loving fiercely to earn respect in love? Finally, I exhaled and faced her. Because I don't want to reconcile. Saying that felt like a weight lifted off my shoulders. I had regained more than just my dignity. I reclaimed the part of myself I'd lost over time. She opened her mouth and after a long while asked, "Why?" I said, "Because I'm too tired. I never know when the next breakup will be or what it'll be over. It's like walking on thin ice, Victoria. I only realized after breaking up with you that life can be so grounded. No need to worry about imminent arguments or looming breakups. Life's center and focus are always on yourself, and you can control everything. It's such a wonderful feeling." Victoria pursed her lips and asked, "Do you not love me anymore?" Victoria was a head shorter than me and always looked up at me with disdainful eyes full of arrogance. But now she looked almost pitiful, unable to meet my gaze. 10 years, Charles. It took you 10 years to make this proud woman bow her head. I replied calmly, "Perhaps I don't." She reacted with a hint of agitation, grabbed my sleeve, but I pushed her away. The way I pushed her seemed to hurt her, and her eyes were filled with sadness. She said, "You pushed me." I sighed and replied, "Do you remember how I used to come to you to make up?" Victoria was a very proud person, pampered since childhood. Back then, I was the one who pursued her, and it seemed like our fate was scripted from that moment. She would throw a tantrum and I would smile, she would argue and I would coax, she would run and I would chase. Countless times, she wanted to break up over trivial matters. She would even threaten to break up just because I didn't answer her question in the way she wanted after watching a short video. By now I can't think too much about the past, otherwise it feels like I was under some spell or had gone mad. When I mentioned this, she was stunned for a moment, followed by a long silence. Yes, she probably realized how unseemly it was. I said, "Miss Victoria, before asking others questions, you should ask yourself first." She asked what I meant. I said, "Before asking me if I love you, ask yourself if you have ever loved me." I left her standing there and walked away briskly without looking back. Sometimes, it's only when you boldly take action that you discover a whole new world. For instance, I found that leaving Victoria far behind felt so good. From then on, she could no longer affect me, no matter where she appeared. For example, at the negotiation table, Victoria unexpectedly became a client from the other side. Despite knowing nothing about renewable energy, she leveraged family connections to enter a medium-sized energy company and came with Leonard to negotiate business with my client. As the product provider, I was naturally placed at the table, mainly to answer customer queries. Victoria asked many questions about the product, forcing me to focus entirely on her. By the time the meeting ended, it was already 6 in the evening. Victoria stood up with a smile and said, "Thank you all for your hard work today. Leonard has booked a table downstairs for us to have a simple meal." My client, William, immediately said, "Not at all. Today, with Leonard and Miss Victoria gracing us with your presence, it's only right that I host. Leonard invites, and I pay." I was ready to slip away amid the crowd, but William scanned the group and suddenly asked, "Where's Charles?" I just saw him here. I had no choice but to respond, "Here." He immediately called me over with a smile, "Charles, join us. You've worked hard today, presenting and explaining the product so thoroughly." He introduced me to Leonard, saying, "When Charles first came, I was worried he was too young and inexperienced, just someone sent by his boss to brush me off. But the more we worked together, the more reliable he proved to be." Leonard also smiled and said, "Indeed, young and promising. The future belongs to the young." With that, he pulled Victoria over and introduced her. "This is my niece, Victoria. I saw you had a good discussion about the product earlier. Why not take this opportunity to know each other better?" Victoria reached out her hand to me and said, "Hello, Mr. Charles. I didn't expect such a lively dinner." As we arrived at the restaurant downstairs, we ran into someone familiar before we even sat down. It was Victoria's childhood friend, Ethan. He casually approached Victoria and greeted, "Victoria, why didn't you mention you'd be here today when we were texting?" The statement was artfully crafted, suggesting the frequency and content of their messages indicated a significant relationship. Leonard laughed and said, "A friend of Victoria's? Why not join us?" Ethan immediately nodded and, in a show of possession, put his arm around Victoria's shoulders and said, "Sure, thank you." A colleague standing next to me commented, "Is he trying to assert dominance? Doing this at a work event is really awkward." Victoria seemed a bit flustered and glanced back at us. A group blocking the entrance did indeed make for an awkward scene. William quickly ushered us inside and I excused myself to the restroom, only returning when the dishes were being served. As I entered, I heard Ethan say, "Victoria and I aren't like that, don't misunderstand, she has a boyfriend." Unexpectedly, a colleague with a knack for bold remarks suddenly quipped, "Well, her boyfriend must be really unlucky, ha ha." I saw William rub his forehead and say, "Why are you here today? You usually skip these dinners." I then realized this was the same colleague who had a sharp exchange with me at the entrance, a burly guy known for his candid and sometimes uncomfortable comments. He calmly replied, "I'm here for the food. Meetings running into dinner time are really just about the meal, aren't they?" William helpless introduced him, "Leonard, Miss Victoria. This is our design director for the entire service line, Sincere." Ethan sarcastically remarked, "Wow, William, your design director is really built. Looks like he just came from a construction site. Is design a physical job here?" William only closed his eyes for a moment and then showed a sympathetic expression. It took me 10 minutes to understand why. That hint of sympathy was meant for whom? I only heard Sincere say, "Look at you, all worn out. I'm big because I lift weights. What do you do to end up so weak?" It's a pity, though. Weightlifting might make you stronger, but it won't improve your brain. Otherwise, I'd suggest you try it. Ever since you came in, I've been wanting to ask who you are and why you're here. You look like a jobless wanderer. Who would invite you to a business dinner, and you just happened to bump into Victoria? If you were Miss Victoria's boyfriend, I'd see you as a sycophant. But with no connection at all, what are you showing off for? You're not even worthy of being a sycophant. After saying this, he still found time to drink 3 bowls of soup and eat 5 bowls of rice. Then he turned to his boss and said, "William, the question I just asked is very important. I'll leave this mess to you. Make sure to get an answer. It concerns which companies we need to blacklist next." He picked up his coat with one hand, patted my arm with the other, and said, "All right, folks, we're off. Enjoy your meal." For some reason, I instinctively followed him. We lived in the same neighborhood, close to our company. Most colleagues rented nearby. All the way, I was pondering how to tell this brother that Victoria was my ex-girlfriend. He stood up for me so righteously against Ethan today, and even saved me from embarrassment on his way out. I couldn't bear to deceive him. As I was racking my brain on how to start the conversation, he voiced a doubtful sound from my right. "Hey Charles, your ex-girlfriend isn't that great." Seeing my shocked face, he burst into laughter and said, "Why so surprised? Didn't she block you on the way to the company the other day?" I came down 5 minutes later and heard everything. Plus, she was so obvious in the meeting room today, staring at you and asking you questions. You think Will didn't notice? He specifically called you here, otherwise, why would he bother playing matchmaker between clients and starve himself as the third party? Though we weren't very familiar once the topic was opened. It seemed much easier to talk. We chatted a lot on our way back. I discovered he was actually 10 years older than me, yet his energy seemed younger. He laughed. "Why would I lie? My ID proves everything. I never commit to a fixed girlfriend. If I like someone, I date them. If it gets boring, I break up. I never play the sycophant. All the money I earn is spent on myself. I work out, play with cars, and do what makes me happy." Through him, I saw another possibility in life. I always earned a decent amount, but besides supporting my family, I had to match Victoria's lifestyle. As she always said, she couldn't compromise on her quality of life, so her clothes and living standards were never ordinary. Many times, I prepared things that didn't fit my lifestyle for her, like a 150 electric toothbrush or a 15 melon. It may not sound extravagant, but for someone with a moderate income and a habit of saving, it was a burden. My personal spending was squeezed to almost nothing. Sincere perceived my silence and asked bluntly, "Do you still like her?" I shook my head with a smile. I wouldn't dare. He shrugged. "Then don't like her. Or find another woman to like. If that doesn't work, find another one. Need me to introduce you to someone?" As we chatted while walking, we discovered we lived in adjacent buildings. Before parting, he waved and said, "Let's grab a drink and have a good time one evening." I looked at his sincere eyes and asked, "Tomorrow?" He immediately replied, "Sure thing. Meet me after work tomorrow." Back home, I opened my phone and found colleagues discussing the incident in a small group chat. Someone said, "Wow, Sincere's the best. Not only does he stand up to William, but now he also dares to challenge clients." Sincere replied, "Let's see him fire me if he can." A colleague responded, "Ha ha ha, stop joking. He's avoiding work just to not get on your nerves, let alone fire you. Sincere is our company's only all-rounder on the service line. From design to development to production, he can handle it all solo and very efficiently." Sincere added, "Of course, I have a new service line launching tomorrow. Otherwise, I wouldn't be so cocky. Ha ha ha. No company would give up such talent. Being irreplaceable is your core competitiveness." This phrase applies to any situation. Sincere's dominance in the workplace is due to his strong capabilities, but producing results is something he must do. I once made Victoria irreplaceable in my emotions, which is why she acted recklessly towards me. Her reliance was on my love, but she didn't understand that love without reciprocation cannot evolve into eternal love. Eventually it will be worn out or replaced. Let's learn from this, Victoria. William's face time in the office lasted less than half a day before he was subdued by the newly launched service line. He cheerfully ran to Sincere's office and asked, "Sincere, when will today's testing end?" Sincere replied in a voice loud enough for the entire office to hear, "We can wrap it up after our afternoon tea." William caught on and said, Got it. I've arranged afternoon tea for everyone today. If there's anything you want to eat, go register at the front desk. You're allowed to eat and take some." Leonard's collaboration with the company was ongoing, and Victoria had accompanied him to observe a few times. William had arranged for me to introduce the company to her. Sincere shook his head and didn't say much. After the service ended that day, Victoria said to me, "Charles, can we have dinner together?" Honestly, I didn't really want to deal with her, but I remembered Sincere's advice. When you need to cut ties, do it decisively. Otherwise, you'll face chaos. It's like a cat making a mess everywhere. Only neutering can solve it. I was glad I took Sincere's advice because I heard an apology from Victoria. She sat across from me, tears streaming down her face, and said, "I'm sorry, Charles. I've been too stubborn all this time. It's my fault. Can you forgive me? I promise I won't bring up breaking up anymore. If you agree, I'm willing to marry you and register our marriage right away, without asking for a single penny." Who would have thought? I used to long so much for a family with Victoria, hoping she would become my wife. 10 years ago, or even a year ago, I wouldn't have dared to imagine it. My first thought when I found out Victoria was willing to marry me was surprisingly a sense of amusement. At the moment it seemed quite funny. This time I asked her why. She wiped the tears from the corners of her eyes and sincerely replied, "Because of love, Charles. Because I love you. During the time you were away, I realized I couldn't live without you. Everything I did reminded me of you. Perhaps for me you are like air, you don't feel its importance until it's gone. And then you can't live without it. Such a supreme compliment. If only I could truly feel it. All love should be perceptible to be considered genuine. Otherwise, merely spoken feelings would become truths." I smiled and said, "Victoria, do you know what you've taught me?" She looked at me intently, her eyes reflecting me. I said, "You've proven one thing, that you can live well after losing anyone." I picked up my phone from the table, put it in my pocket, and smiled at her, saying, "This message is for you today. You can take the coming days to truly feel it, starting with this dinner you're having alone." Once again, I left her with my back. This time, I didn't try to gauge her reaction through any angle, whether through the door's reflection or a glance back. She no longer affected me in any manner. It felt wonderful. I was reborn, and it only took half a year. All deep wounds gradually scab over with time, eventually becoming nothing more than a painless mark. 2 years later, the service line that Sincere and I developed together began to officially turn a profit, with commissions accounted for every minute. During a break at work, he asked me, "Want to hit the gym with me this afternoon? I found some girls to join us." Seeing his physique, I shook my head and declined. It was simply too exhausting. I'm a homebody, and after trying it for 2 weeks, I realized I just couldn't keep up with it. I preferred the life of eating and sleeping to my heart's content. Sincere didn't mind. He laughed and said, "But you have to meet the girl I introduced to you, right? She's my college junior, super cute." So that's what he was waiting for. Before I could refuse, he added, "You're not planning to go back to pining over someone, are you?" He always had a sarcastic tone when it came to Victoria, despite our close cooperation over the years. I replied exasperatedly, Fine, I'll meet her. I like cute ones." When we met, I realized she truly was cute, full of energy and charm, the kind of cute that would make even Victoria feel a bit inferior. Once, while we were out for dinner, we ran into Victoria. She didn't come to work for 3 days after that. Sincere said she went home to heal. That's fine. I've long since healed myself. Let her lick her own wounds. I'm off to a date. Bye-bye.